My name is Javier Morales, and I come from a little apartment on the south side of Chicago where the sound of traffic blends with the rhythm of my mommy's prayers every morning. My parents came here from Oaxaca with nothing but blistered hands and bigger hopes for me than they'd ever dared hold for themselves. I went to Carver Prep, a public magnet school that's supposed to serve gifted students, but the way they treated some of us, you'd think our last names erased our transcripts. I remember the day I walked into Ms. Prescott's office. She's the college counselor with the expensive blonde highlights and the habit of smiling just a little tighter when you speak English with an accent. I was so proud, carrying my ACT scores, 35, second highest in the school, and a list of colleges I wanted to apply to: Harvard, Yale, Columbia, Princeton. She barely looked at me before she sighed and said, "Javier, I really think you should set more realistic goals. Maybe a trade school? Or a community college near home so you can help your family." I didn't say anything at first. I was stunned, because she didn't even ask me about my interests or what I wanted. I just sat there blinking while she talked about fit and likelihood and used coded phrases like statistically underrepresented, limited support, and cultural adjustment. She didn't even pretend to believe in me. I left her office feeling like I'd done something wrong by dreaming big, and when I told my mama, she hugged me so tight and said, "Majito, tu vas a volar. You're going to fly." That's when I decided I wasn't going to let her box me in. I applied to every Ivy League school, every single one. I did it on my cracked Chromebook at the kitchen table between shifts at the grocery store and translating paperwork for my parents. My best friend Amara, a Nigerian-American girl who also got dismissed by Ms. Prescott when she said she wanted to be a doctor, helped me prep for interviews and perfect my essays. We became each other's counselors because the one we had wasn't built for us. I wrote about being the first in my family to finish high school, about working since I was 13, about translating tax documents and court letters, about coding apps in a school that barely had working computers. I wrote in English, but I thought in Spanish, and I let my heart pour onto those pages like I owed it to every brown kid who ever got told to shrink. When the results started coming in, I didn't know whether to scream or cry. First came Harvard, then Yale, Columbia, Princeton, Penn Brown, Dartmouth, Cornell, every single one. My mama cried into her rosary and whispered, "Gracias a Dios." I took the letters and walked straight into Ms. Prescott's office and laid them on her desk like a deck of cards. She blinked at me, speechless for once, then muttered, "I suppose I misjudged your potential." I smiled and said, "No, man. You misjudged my worth." That night, Amara and I posted a TikTok with our acceptance letters, and it went viral, millions of views. Suddenly, we were being invited to talk on podcasts and education panels about equity, resilience, and how underserved doesn't mean undeserving. And Miss Prescott? She quietly resigned the next semester after a school board inquiry into her counseling patterns showed a clear bias in how she advised students of color. So yeah, I guess in the end, I did get into every Ivy. But more importantly, I proved that people like me don't need permission to aim higher. We just need space to rise. Getting into all 8 Ivy League schools should have been the ending. Like, cue the credits, right? But real life doesn't wrap up so neatly, especially not when your existence still threatens people who are used to seeing doors only open for themselves. I chose Yale. Something about New Haven's rhythm, the residential colleges, the sense of legacy. I wanted to carve my own path through that history. But the moment I set foot on campus with my rolling suitcase, I realized I hadn't crossed the finish line. I'd just been allowed to join the race. During orientation week, it was all smiles and icebreakers until people heard my name. "Oh, where are you from?" they'd ask. I'd say Chicago. And then came the pause. "No, like, where are you really from?" As if my birth certificate wasn't American enough. My roommate, Chase, blonde, lacrosse playing, New Jersey money, kept calling me Javi, even after I asked him not to. He said it was catchier. I tried to let it slide. I told myself he didn't mean harm. But then he started mocking my accent when I called my mama. I heard him once through the thin dorm walls, laughing with friends, mimicking the way she says, "Majito." I felt my ears burn with shame and rage. It didn't stop there. In our Intro to Political Science class, I raised my hand to challenge a reading about immigration policy that painted Latin American migrants as threats. The professor, Dr. Whitaker, who liked to brag about being nonpartisan, interrupted me mid-sentence to say, "Let's remember to keep personal bias out of academic discussion." I wanted to scream. Wasn't his reading choice biased? Wasn't erasing my lived experience the most biased thing of all? After class, a white girl named Stephanie with a Kate Spade bag pulled me aside and said, "You're really brave for speaking up. I mean, I don't always agree, but it's cool you're here. Cool you're here." Like I was an exhibit in a museum, not her peer. I started retreating, eating alone, skipping campus parties, drowning myself in assignments. The worst came during a mixer for one of the elite student societies, the kind of thing that practically guarantees internships if you're accepted. I wore my best button down, showed up with a printed resume, and introduced myself with a firm handshake. Halfway through the night, I overheard one of the alumni whisper to another, "Is he on scholarship?" They laughed. Of course. Probably some first-gen initiative. Gotta check the diversity box. I left without saying a word, went back to my dorm, and cried for the first time in months. All the pride, all the effort, it felt like it evaporated the moment I stopped being a headline and started being human to them. I called Amara. She was having a similar time at Johns Hopkins, microaggressions, professors dismissing her knowledge, classmates surprised she was pre-med, without family connections. That's when we made a pact. We weren't going to just survive these institutions. We were going to document them. We launched a blog called Beyond the Brochure, a raw, unfiltered archive of our day-to-day lives at elite colleges as first-gen, low-income students of color. We wrote about everything: code switching in office hours, dining hall stairs, racist graffiti in dorm bathrooms that admins blamed on outsiders. We invited others to contribute, and within weeks, stories were pouring in from Harvard, Columbia, Stanford, even Oxford. Anonymous at first, then signed, then verified. One girl from Princeton shared how a professor called her articulate for a black girl. A guy at Brown wrote about being mistaken for a janitor. We gained traction fast: followers, press, even national media attention. I was asked to speak on NPR. Amara got invited to a summit on educational equity. Suddenly, the very schools trying to keep our stories quiet were being forced to listen. And not just listen, respond. At Yale, under pressure, they started a formal review of discrimination complaints and restructured the diversity office to include real student oversight. Dr. Whitaker? He retired early after multiple students submitted recordings of him silencing marginalized voices. Chase was reassigned to a different room after a formal bias report and had to attend mandatory sensitivity training. The student society that mocked me? Our blog exposed their exclusion practices so publicly, several sponsors pulled out. They had to publicly apologize and open membership to all backgrounds. It wasn't perfect justice, not everything healed overnight, but for the first time, the system cracked, just a little. And through that crack, we made space. Not just for us, but for every student who'd ever walked into those ivy-covered gates and felt like they didn't belong. By senior year, the cracks we'd made in the ivory tower had become visible fractures. Beyond the Brochure wasn't just a blog anymore, it was a national platform. We got profiled in the New York Times. School officials who once ignored us were now emailing us for feedback. I was invited to deliver Yale's senior class remarks. Me, the kid Miss Prescott said should stick to trade school. Standing at that podium in front of thousands, I looked out and saw my mama in the front row, wearing the same second-hand dress she'd worn to my high school graduation, clutching her rosary. I told the crowd, "We are not here by accident, and we are not here alone." Every time someone tried to shrink our dreams, we expanded them. When I walked off stage, professors who once dismissed me stood to clap. But more than that, students of color came up to say, "Because of you, I stayed." Amara and I turned our platform into a nonprofit that mentors first-gen students and holds elite schools accountable. And Miss Prescott? She reached out recently to connect after seeing me on CNN. I left her on read. Because this isn't her story. It's mine, and every kid who dared aim higher than the limits placed on them.